Well, welcome to Session 2, How to Navigate Life with Your Adult Children. And my friend Jim here, great to see you again,
Great
man.
to see you.
And just a reminder, his book is Doing Life with Your Adult Children. And we're actually here because of this book and because of, just so I can be real honest here, I was having a little turbulent water, not terrible, but as one of our board members said, this is way too late. He went through his kids and he said D, F, and C minus. So we're very indebted. Right. And so we're taking a principle each time, asking you to unpack it, and then just trying to have a conversation to help all those other parents that are navigating this crazy world of adult children. So the second principle here is unsolicited advice is usually taken as criticism. Could you unpack that for us?
You know what's funny is I was saying to you that this is what people, they start shaking in their heads once I say that. Unsolicited advice is usually taken as criticism. They go, oh, that's my kid. Yeah. And, you know, Kathy and I didn't see that coming. In fact, Kathy's gift is the gift of giving advice. And she does it, she means well. My gift is the gift of fixing things.
Yes.
Neither work well with these kids. And in fact, I've had to, you know, you could see the scars on my tongue because I've had to learn how to bite my tongue. You know, but the principle is keep your mouth shut, the welcome mat out. Now, there are some things that we do want to give some advice to and some input. I mean, I think that's really important. Yeah. You know, there are issues when a kid is straying deeply and having struggles. Obviously, they need to know what we believe, what we think. But I think we do that too often, and then they don't launch. So it goes back to the idea that, you know, they don't want advice. They're not seeking sometimes our advice, and the fact is that they're going to have to learn. It's back to what we said in that first principle, that experience is a better teacher than advice. And I think that's really hard for us because we typically do know the answers. We typically do have the answers. And it's hard to sit back and say, okay, they're going to have to navigate this.
And I think we often feel very rejected. Yeah. This is what I saw happening. Is, well, how did I get dumb?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, you're now 19, 20, and you don't even ask me, and then we have a conversation sitting around the table or over a cup of coffee someplace, and you're telling me, oh, I got this off the internet, or so-and-so says this. I'm thinking, hey, what do you mean? And it was really hard, I think, for us to accept that's them pulling away is a part of them growing up.
And actually, that's healthy. Because a lot of times we don't see that as healthy. It gets back to our own unhealthiness. But really, them pulling away is a positive trait because they're going to have to figure out how to do it on their own. I think we have to ask for permission.
How have you done that with your kids?
Well, by sometimes winning and sometimes losing. But, you know, I've said, you know, can I speak into that right now? And most of the time with my kids, because I think my kids and your kids are kind of the same. I mean, our kids all had a bump, but they've become pretty responsible. But I remember with Christy one time, Christy and Steve, so my son-in-law, they were living with us for 2 months. And they were going to move to Texas for a year. And they were talking about the move. And so I'm listening in on this, and I'm not thinking either one of them have a really good idea on how they're going to move. They're trying to do it cheap. Right. So I walked in, and I said, can I ask you guys for permission to kind of give you some advice? Yeah. And Christy, who's in an intense conversation with Steve, says, not now, Dad. And I went, oh. And I thought, well, wait, people pay me to give them advice, and my own daughter doesn't want this. So I walked away, and I did the right thing. Not always that I did the right thing, but on this one, I just kind of kept my mouth shut.
I had an interesting situation on this keep your mouth shut. And my son-in-law, I knew him before my daughter did, and I could tell he was a little bit sweet on her, and it was a long journey, and he asked me to mentor him. We met every week for like 2 years, and man, we're really tight, and he's digging into the scriptures, and it's been really, really great. And I'm over at his house, and he goes, could we be peers? I said, what? And I'm not sure he got the word right. He goes, I just kind of want to be peers. I said, well, peers are kind of people that are kind of same age, same thing. It was, well, here's what I mean, is it was really good and you mentored me, and I appreciate your wise counsel, but it just feels like every time that we're together, like you're either sharing something you're learning, or here's a thought you might have, or no matter what I'm doing, you sort of want to help me.
Right.
I mean, I really respect you, but could we just hang out? I didn't even know I was doing it, Jim.
Right, no. And you had been in a different role with him.
Yeah.
And I think we do that with our kids. We do that sometimes with the significant others and the in-laws. And what he really did was he gave you a gift, because he said, you know, I love all the advice and all the respect that I have for you. But the fact is I want to change the relationship just a little bit.
We kind of came full circle, and I had to learn to shut up.
Yeah, right.
And this might be hard for you to believe, but that's very difficult for me.
Oh, for any of us.
Yeah.
I totally think that. It's so key for us, though, to have the kind of relationship with them that they do come back. Remember the movie Field of Dreams?
Yes.
If you build it in the middle of a cornfield, they'll come to the baseball diamond. I mean, seriously. But I think that's the case, that he's going to continue to ask for advice for you. You're his mentor. You talked about that earlier. You're going to be his mentor, but he wants that relationship to be kind of on his term. And so what do? We become their greatest cheerleader.
Yes.
And so we cheer them on. And I think sometimes when we are their significant cheerleader, then they really are going to be willing to ask. And I find that when my kids, or even my in-laws too, when they come and seek advice from me, now they really want to, because they're asking me, and I want to be open to that, and I'm looking for those moments. But if I'm too intrusive, they're not going to want it.
I finally learned that the way that builds that bridge so they come and ask is listening and asking questions.
Yeah.
And there's a passage, I memorized this many years ago. Proverbs 9, 8 through 10 says, "Do not rebuke a mocker lest he hate you. Rebuke a wise man and he'll love you. Give instruction to a wise man and he becomes still wiser. Teach a righteous man and they'll add to their learning." And it goes, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding." And I think there's times where you really, when even your kids are doing some things, mentally sometimes, or their heart, they don't want to hear. And coming on super strong, not only is it not well received, it actually begins to cause distance and resentment. And how have you handled that? Or what we say to parents who are like, we're not talking just about cultural issues and the kind of music you listen to, or whether you're going completely plant-based diet now, or whatever what things are going. But this is about your education, or maybe a moral issue, and you're just getting a wall. What do you say to that parent?
Yeah, I think it's hard. And I've experienced that with my kids. In fact, one of my daughters, she was about an hour away in college, and she wasn't making all great choices. And I would go up every Tuesday, and I always had a list in my pocket that I wanted to cover. But I found that it was much better when it was more natural in the conversation, and sometimes it was. And there were times, Chip, when I would get in that car and I'd say, "Did I waste my time? I just had a meal with her, but I didn't get to go through my list." Yeah. And what's interesting is I found that just pouring into her, and she knew what I was doing, and she probably knew I had a list, to be honest. But there were other times when, with her especially, there were a few times where I needed to say, look, we need to talk through this. And I want to tell you, I love you. I trust you. I think you're going to make good decisions. But I feel like I'm still your dad. I need to have this conversation. But it's what you did with your son-in-law. I think it comes through asking the right questions. It's a little bit like fishing. You're waiting for that fish to bite. You got to have some patience and perseverance. And you don't have to have the answer immediately. Because if we jump in, then I think they're going to pull back.
You share a story in the book that would be great to close on. It's about Ruth Graham, because sometimes they do go away, and sometimes they don't make small bad decisions. They make some really big ones. Would you share that story?
Yeah, sure. Ruth Graham actually told me this. I love her transparency. But, she was married to someone who had worked for the Graham organization for years and years, and that's where they had their children. And then he made some real immoral decisions. And on the rebound, she married somebody that her parents, think of this is Billy and Ruth Graham. Wow. This is Ruth Jr., who we're talking about, had said, "Don't think this is a wise idea. Maybe you're rushing into this." And so she married this guy. They went down to Florida, and within 6 weeks, it was a disaster, and there was some abuse things going on. And so she got in her car and she started driving. And she didn't know where she was going to go. She ended up driving toward home. Because when we're in trouble, we go home, especially if the parents have been kind and generous. If they're always, poking, you may not go home. Calls her dad up and says, "Dad, I'm coming home. You were right." And he didn't say, "I told you so."
Wow.
So she gets there, and of course there's a gate. It's the Billy Graham compound. So they open the gate, and the dad is pacing. And she comes up, and the door opens, and it's her dad. And he just says, "Welcome home, Bunny." That's what they called her, Bunny. "Welcome home, Bunny. I love you, and I'm so proud of you." Well, he could have said so many other things at that moment, He could have said, I told you so. He could have said, oh, that was a poor choice and all this. But instead what he did was he just welcomed her. And guess what? That brought them closer together. And there were major great conversations that took place then. But I love the grace and the love that he showed in that moment.
What a great way to close our time.
Yeah.
I don't know where you're at, but Jim and I have adult kids, and that story about Billy Graham and his wife receiving back someone who's made some really bad decisions. Here's the principle. Keep your mouth shut and keep the welcome mat open. I mean, that's the principle. I also heard you say there are certain times that's not a blank check. We have to speak into things, and we'll deal with those a little bit later. But I think what you heard was ask questions, let them grow up, get involved in their life, be a listener. And if you find yourself with a child that's really blown it, pray hard. Ask God to cause them to return. And when they do, I think Billy and Ruth gave us a great example. Dig into those questions and ask God to show you your next steps.